Let's take a look at our reader's notebook. As you open up the front cover, you will find on the inside cover some nice guidelines for what you should be doing during mini lessons and guided reading. So when your teacher is with a group of students, not including you, these are some things that you can be doing. On the next page, you will notice that if you flip up the top, you have a tab titled Reading List. This is the place in your notebook where you can, if your teacher requires you to read from each genre, you can write down what your teacher expects, and then you can tally your books. So if your teacher expects you to read 2 realistic fiction, you can tally them off as you read them. Maybe you will really like realistic fiction and you read 5. As you turn the page, you will find that there are just many pages where you can write down the title of the books as you read them, the author, the genre code, fiction or nonfiction, so you could write an F or an NF, the date you completed it, and a one-word response. So that one-word response could be whether you really, really liked the book, or it could be whether you thought it was easy, just right, or difficult. And that's that first section. The next section, you'll come to another tab that's called Genre Studies. All right, so here they show you the different kinds of genres. So under fiction, we've got realism, that includes realistic fiction and historical fiction. So these are things that could really happen in real life. These are things that happened long ago, and it's pretty hard to call them nonfiction because a lot of it's done from memory. So they call it fiction, but it really did happen. Then there's also fantasy. Prose or poetry up at the top just means you know what poetry is, and prose is just other kinds of writing. So in fantasy, we've got the traditional kind of literature, which includes fairy tales and folk tales, things like that. And then modern fantasy, which includes science fiction, things like the Harry Potter books, things that can't really happen in real life. Nonfiction is true, and it can, again, be prose or poetry. And nonfiction is informational. It gives you facts. So you've got biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs. Those are stories about a person's life. You've got narrative nonfiction. You are all writing a personal narrative right now, and that will be a true story about you. And then you have expository nonfiction, which might include how to do something or persuasive arguments. You'll be doing a persuasive paper later on in the year. Then as you turn the page, each of these pages is just for you to kind of explore each genre. So whatever book you're reading, put the genre at the top. Let's say you are reading for your teacher and you need to read 2 nonfiction books. So you would write nonfiction. I would, if I were you, put the title in here too. And then a working definition is just as you're reading it, you kind of figure out what you think nonfiction books contain. A working definition means that it's not completely finished. And on these pages, you can't really get wrong answers if you're putting down what you notice and come up with examples that you think would be other books. This is a notebook for you to explore books a little bit, and it's not a book that you have to worry about getting the wrong answers. It's just kind of exploring and learning more about books. The third tab is for mini lessons. Now, your mini lessons are usually taught in the classroom with your teacher. Often there's an anchor chart that's included. When you are listening to your teacher teach the anchor chart or watching it on video, you can be using this section of your notebook to write down what you learn and what you want to remember about those mini lessons. Your teacher may give you a copy of the basic principles that are being taught that you can glue in there and add notes to. It's completely up to you and your teacher how you want to do that. There is also a guide for you to help you with fiction structures, to know how stories are put together by authors, how you can use different tools like flash forward and flash back, and then some different nonfiction examples. These are good diagrams that you can use graphic organizers to collect your thoughts, and this is a great place even to plan your writing. These are some kinds of things you could include in your writer's notebook. All right, this is a big section, and it's mostly just plain lined paper. So anytime you're reading, I would keep this book by you and write down things you want to remember, questions that you have, anything that you would like to bring to the attention of the class. Your next tab is called Writing About Reading. So even though this last section you were writing about reading, that's going to be your main job here. So first of all, there is a list of all the different kinds of examples you can use to write about reading. And then I would encourage you to try each one and then make tallies of how many times you do it. So the first one is a letter to your teacher or another reader. And the definition says it's a letter to share your thinking about your reading with another reader who writes back to you. So if you look inside, there is a sample letter that you can use. There are suggestions for writing, because sometimes when you're writing, it's hard to think of ideas or what you should say. So go back to this is actually 2 full pages of lots of suggestions. And then again, it's just lined pages. I want to go back to the other side of the tab to show you that there is also a place of guidelines for checking your writing. Just some things that you should always do before you turn things in. And there is one final tab on your reader's notebook, way in the back, and it is a glossary of terms. So these are some of the terms that your teacher uses a lot during reading whole group and reading mini lessons, guided reading. So if you hear a word and you're not real sure about it, there's a nice glossary in the back, and it goes quite a few pages. At the very back, inside cover, there's just some more tips for you, how you should talk about reading and ways to have a good book discussion. We've talked a lot in class about how book discussions really help develop your thinking and help you to understand books better and help others to understand books better. So that is how you will use your reader's notebook. I encourage you to keep this with you whenever you're reading. Put your name on the front and your school, maybe even your classroom teacher, and enjoy.